Hi, boys and girls, and welcome back to another edition of Snack Time with a Dollop of Read Aloud. We're going to continue on our adventure with Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, with permission granted by Houghton Mifflin Publishing for me to be able to share this book with you. So when we were last together, oh my goodness, so much happened. So much happened. Not only was the Rosens taken to safety on Uncle Henrique's boat, but part of the plan wasn't followed through. Remember, Peter gave Mr. Rosen a packet, a very important packet that he was supposed to give Uncle Henrique when they got to the boat. But when Mr. Rosen tripped leaving the house because it was very, very dark, the packet fell out of his jacket. When Mama finally came back after she was hurt and Annemarie helped her back to the house, they saw that the packet was by the step, and Mama knew that all of their hard work could possibly have been for nothing. Now, if you don't remember, Uncle Henrique and Peter are working together to try and get the Rosens and other Jewish people out of Denmark and to safety in Sweden. Remember, Sweden is one of the few countries that is neutral, which means they're not taking a side in World War II. So that is a place where Jewish people are trying to flee Europe to try and be safe. So, what was Annemarie to do? Annemarie decided in that very moment that she had to be the one to take the packet down to Uncle Henrique. Now, as we were reading though, she had to go, it was still dark, she had to go through the forest on a dark path to find her way to the harbor. And when she finally almost got there, and she was proud of herself, even though there were a few scary moments, she was proud of herself that she had gotten to where she needed to be quickly and without being seen. Someone saw her. Not just someone. 4 Nazi soldiers, 2 angry dogs. So that's where we left off. I can't wait to find out what happens. Here we go. Chapter 15, My Dog Smells Meat. Annemarie's mind raced. She remembered what her mother had said. If anyone stops you, you must pretend to be nothing more than a silly little girl. She stared at the soldiers. She remembered how she had stared at the others, frightened when they had stopped her on the street. Kirsty hadn't been frightened. Kirsty had been, well, nothing more than a silly little girl, angered because the soldier had dared to touch her hair that afternoon. She had known nothing of the danger, and the soldier had been amused by her. Annemarie willed herself with all of her being to behave just as Kirsty would. Good morning, she said carefully to the soldiers. They looked her up and down in silence. Both dogs were tense and alert. The 2 soldiers who held their leashes wore thick gloves. What are you doing here? One of them asked. Annemarie held out her basket with the thick loaf of bread visible. Oh, my Uncle Henrique, he forgot his lunch. And I'm taking it to him. He's a fisherman. The soldiers were looking around, and their eyes glanced behind her and scanned the bushes on either side. Are you alone? One asked. Annemarie nodded. Yes. One of the dogs growled, but she noticed that both dogs were looking at her lunch basket. One soldier stepped forward. The other and the 2 holding the dogs remained where they were. You came out before daybreak just to bring a lunch? Why doesn't your uncle eat fish? What would Kirsty reply, Annemarie thought. Annemarie tried to giggle the way her sister might. Oh, Uncle Henrique doesn't even like fish, she said, laughing. He says he sees too much of it, and the smell is too much as well. Anyways, he wouldn't eat his fish raw. She made a face. Well, I suppose he would if he was starving, but Uncle Heinrich always has bread and cheese for lunch. Keep chattering, she told herself as Kirsty would. Be a silly little girl. I like fish, she said. I like it the way my mother cooks it, and sometimes she rolls it in breadcrumbs, and... The soldier reached forward and grabbed the crisp loaf of bread from the basket. He examined it carefully, then he broke it in half, pulling the two halves apart with his fists. That would have enraged Kirsty. Don't, she said angrily. That's my Uncle Heinrich's bread. My mother baked it for him. The soldier ignored her. He tossed the two halves of the loaf to the ground, one half in front of each dog. They consumed it, each snapping at the bread and gulping it down so that it was gone in an instant. Have you seen anyone in the woods? The soldier barked at her. No, only you. Annemarie stared at him. What are you doing in the woods anyways? You're making me late. Uncle Heinrich's boat will leave before I get there with his lunch. Or what's left of his lunch. The soldier picked up the wedge of cheese and he turned it over in his hand. He turned to the three behind him and asked them something in their own language. One of them answered, 9, in a bored tone. Annemarie recognized the word. The man had replied, no. He had probably been asked, Annemarie thought, do you want this? Or should I give it to the dogs? The soldier continued to hold the cheese. He tossed it back and forth between his hands. Annemarie gave an exasperated sigh. Can I please go now? The soldier reached for the apple. He noted its brown spots and made a face of disgust. No meat? He asked, glancing at the basket and napkin that lay in its bottom. Annemarie gave him a withering look. You know we have no meat, she said insolently. Your army eats all of Denmark's meat. Please, please, she implored in her mind, don't lift the napkin. The soldier laughed. He dropped the bruised apple on the floor, and one of the dogs leaned forward, pulling at the leash, sniffed the apple, and stepped back. Both the dogs still looked intensely at the basket, their ears alert, their mouths open. Saliva glistened on their smooth pink gums. My dogs smell meat. They smell squirrels in the woods, Annemarie responded. You should take them hunting. The soldier reached forward with the cheese in one hand, as if he were going to return it to the basket, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled out the flowered cotton napkin. Annemarie froze. Your uncle has a pretty little lunch, the soldier said scornfully, crumpling the napkin around the cheese in his hand. Like a woman, he added with contempt. Then his eyes locked on the basket. He handed the cheese and the napkin to the soldier beside him. What's that? There in the bottom, he asked in a different, tenser voice. What would Kirsty do? Annemarie stamped her foot. Suddenly, to her own surprise, she began to cry. I don't know, she said, her voice choked. My mother's going to be angry that you stopped me and you made me late, and you've completely ruined my Uncle Heinrich's lunch. So now he'll be mad at me too. The dogs whined and struggled against the leashes, nosing forward to the basket. One of the other soldiers muttered something in German. The soldier took out the packet. Why is this so carefully hidden? As he waved it. So like if this is the packet, why is this so carefully hidden? He snapped. Annemarie wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. It wasn't hidden any more than the napkin was. I don't know what it is. Then she realized what was true. She had no idea what was in the packet, and that helped to make her brave. The soldier tore the paper in half, the soldier tore open the paper, while below him on the ground the dogs strained and snarled, pulling against their leashes. Their muscles were visible beneath their sleek, short-haired flesh. He looked inside, then glared at Annemarie. Stop crying, you idiot girl, he said harshly. Your stupid mother sent your uncle a handkerchief. In Germany, the women have better things to do. They don't stay at home hemming handkerchiefs for their men. He gestured with the folded white cloth and gave a short, caustic laugh. Ha! At least she didn't stitch flowers on it. He flung it to the ground, still half opened and still half wrapped in the paper beside the apple. The dogs lunged, sniffed at it eagerly, then subsided, disappointed again. Go on, the soldier said. He dropped the cheese and the napkin back into her basket. Go on to your uncle and tell him that the German dogs enjoyed his bread. All the soldiers pushed past her. One of them laughed, and they spoke to each other in their own language. In a moment they had disappeared down the path in the direction from which Annemarie had come. Quickly she picked up the apple and opened the packet with the white handkerchief inside. She put them in the basket and ran around the bend towards the harbor, where the morning sky was now bright with early sun, and some of the boat engines were starting their strident din, so you could hear all the boats starting to turn on. The Ingeborg was still there by the dock, and Uncle Henrique was there, his light hair windblown and bright as he knelt by the nets. Annemarie called to him, and he came to the side, his face worried when he recognized her on the dock. She handed the basket across. Mama sent your lunch, she said, her voice quivering. But the soldiers stopped me, and they took your bread. She didn't dare to tell him more. Henrique glanced quickly into the basket. She could see the look of relief on his face and knew that it was because he saw that the packet was there, even though it was torn open. Thank you, he said, and the relief was evident. Annemarie looked quickly around the familiar small boat. She could see down the passageway into the empty cabin. There was no sign of the Rosens or the others. Uncle Henrique followed her eyes and her puzzled look. All is well, he said quietly. Don't worry. Everything is all right. I wasn't sure, he said, but now he eyed the basket in his hands. Because of you, Annemarie, everything will be all right. You run home now and tell your mama not to worry. I will see you both this evening. He grinned at her suddenly, then They took my bread, eh? Well, I hope they choke on it, he said. That's the end of chapter 15. So that was exciting. So Annemarie had to channel Kirsty, which I thought was kind of funny considering that she always thinks Kirsty is kind of like an annoying little pest. But she used Kirsty's kind of sassiness to get her out of that situation. That was good thinking. I wonder if she would have been able to do that if she knew what was in that basket. Interesting. So tomorrow we will finish Number the Stars and we will find out what happens with our friends. Until then, I miss you. I love you. Stay safe. Bye, guys.